It's so wonderful to be with all you dear friends. Thank you for coming. I know this is a pseudo birthday. I've been 82 now for a whole month. But it's delightful. I thought today, and I hope it won't be displeasing to you, that I would talk about my life. It seems sort of a natural thing to do. I don't suppose it's time yet to sum it all up, but still the footsteps fast approach. This last song is an example of what I want to talk about. Not just what I have done in my life, but what I have become, or what I have learned from my life, my inner lessons. This last song was a very good example, because somebody came to me and told me what an absolute waste my life was. I had done absolutely nothing worthwhile, and I should be ashamed of myself. And I just took it calmly. He took a whole hour on this diatribe, and I didn't react. I just accepted it. But afterwards, I wrote this song. Though green summer fade and what is it? Oh, green summer fade and winter draw near, my Lord, in your presence I live without fear. And so it doesn't matter what happens to us in this world or what people think of us. I have been blessed with the understanding somehow that people's opinions just don't matter. My opinion doesn't matter. I don't matter. Nothing matters except God's bliss and God's presence. But one reason people's opinions don't matter is that they're usually wrong. And when they're right, we should be grateful and listen. And so, from the very beginning, I have always, even as a child, I was very skeptical of reasoning. I used to use it for fun. I would give preposterous reasons for doing things that I knew nobody would believe. For example, I might have said, although I didn't, to my mother, because I wasn't very fond of spinach, that spinach is the color of gangrene after all. And besides, it's bitter tasting, and you don't want me to grow up and become bitter, do you? And so I would come up with all these ridiculous reasons, but it all had a serious purpose, which was to understand that reasoning cannot give you real truth. You can use reasoning any way you want. And although I used it for fun, I've seen so many people use reasoning to justify conclusions that are patently false. But so many people, having used their reasoning in that direction, end up believing it. And so I've always had this understanding that if my heart doesn't concur, beware. When I read Master's book, there was a lot in that book that went against my reason. All those miracles, I really had to put them on a shelf. I couldn't face them. I mean, somebody living hundreds of years, on page 8, Lahiri Mahasaya is materializing in a wheat field. It was just beyond all possible conceptualization from a rational point of view. But it so deeply touched my heart that I took the next bus to California and met him and said, I want to be your disciple. And that decision has never wavered in my whole life. This is my 60th year of discipleship. But my heart knew, and over time my reason caught up with me and I understood. But this is one of the basic lessons that I learned in my life that I want to share with people. Don't trust reasoning. It's a tricky tool. It can easily slip and cut you. So always look to see if your heart concurs. But the heart also can be completely wrong. And this also I learned. There was a time in India when I was feeling just absolute filled with love and a freedom in my heart that was just thrilling. And I mentioned this to Ananda Ma, and she looked and she said, yes, but remember the heart's feeling, if you keep it centered there, can go downward as well as upward. And I found that indeed it did, and I crashed. And then I realized that heart's feeling, you must always, what the emotions of the heart, they can mislead you terribly. And that it is only when you can raise that feeling, and so you have to direct that feeling upward to this point. And when you bring the heart and head together in a harmonious whole, with the heart being directed toward reason, toward the head, only then can you be sure that your emotions are right. Otherwise, they too can greatly mislead you. And so this is another thing. Let your heart's love, your devotion, always be interned. Let it not flow too much outward. This is something that was wonderful in Master's teaching, that he said, yes, bhakti is important, devotion is important, but always direct it inwardly. Otherwise, I remember somebody in India telling me recently that he loved bhakti and he loved chanting, but he was a very worldly fellow. What's this? You get all excited and sing all, even with tears, to God, and then you go back and have your ham and eggs and start looking at all the things that you shouldn't look at. It's not enough to feel. It must be feeling directed in the right way. And when these two work together, and this is why men and women are drawn together and why they should learn from each other and learn the right lessons from each other. And unfortunately, often they learn the wrong lessons. But when they learn rightly, that harmony between feeling and reason can help them to find God. So, women and men, all of you, try to appreciate the divine in each other. That's why they say in the Indian scriptures that the wife should look upon the husband not only as a man, but as God in that form. And the man should look upon his wife also as the divine mother. And each can bring the divine out in the other, or help to bring it out, if he has that attitude. Well, these are among lessons that I have learned in my life. And whatever I have taught in my books, in my lectures, in whatever teaching and sharing I have done, has always been not just parroting Master's words, but trying to make them my own. And I have found that you can improve on it because you make it personal then. I've had a very interesting experience recently because I decided that we that we would publish, just a moment. Me. I decided that we would publish the original Whispers from Eternity. What happened was that I didn't like at all the one that Tara did in 1958. She was a wonderful editor, really very good, absolutely perfect for what she was doing. But when it came to poetry, she didn't have it. She didn't have a sense for sound. She talked of Master in his name, Mukunda. She called him Makanta. She didn't have a hearing for that kind of thing. It's strange. But her editing of those poems and prayers tended to be very peremptory. From the depths of slumber, as I ascend the spiring stairways of wakefulness, I will whisper, God, God, God. Those were Master's words. She changed them to read, from the depths of slumber, as I ascend the spiral stairways of wakefulness, I whisper. Well, it doesn't sound right. It lacks that. It sounds peremptory. And that's the way she spoke. That's the way she thought. And I never liked what she did with Whispers, and so I decided to put out the original. But as I looked at it, I thought, oh my gosh, it does need editing. He told me he had edited it, but it needs more editing. And, the thing with a master, I've discovered this because he told me my life would be editing as well as writing and lecturing. I said to him, but sir, haven't you written everything already that needs to be written? He said, don't say that. Much more is needed. And so I discovered that this is true because so many things he wrote can be applied. And what I have written also, I've tried to make it so seminal that other people can take seed thoughts and develop them into more books. And so this can become a whole genre of information and teaching rather than just one person writing. There's so little that one body can do. And so I ask all of you to take what we have and make it your own and expand upon it. And as I was going over his Whispers, I saw that this is needed here too. I'm going to read you just 3 examples so that you can wait a minute now. Yes. I'll read you the original and then I'll read you what I've done. And you'll see that it's his book, it's his inspiration, but as I've done with some of my writings and as he wanted me to do, I've also made them my own. He said in the preface to, or the introduction to Whispers, that you should make these your own. Don't just mimic, parrot. To speak, O Master's words only as he did them, you might as well put it on a record and just play it, or teach a parrot. It could say the words if it was intelligent enough, but he wanted it. He wants, and this is the role of the disciple, to make it his own and bring it out. So with this book, I have seen that whereas much of it, most of it probably, I can leave pretty close to what it was, although the grammar wasn't always right, although there were some mixture of metaphors that needed to be cleaned up. And so sometimes Master in his exuberance would just sort of pour it out, and then you have to come in there and sort of clean up the pieces. And all that. And yet, what I have found in reading these Whispers is this incredible outpouring of love for everybody. I have met many saints. I've had that great opportunity to meet them. And I've seen that most of them are very austere. They are probably still at that stage where they need to sort of keep delusion at a distance and just focus strictly on God. But Master was an avatar, and Master he was free and so able. You know, I've always thought of an image of P.G. Wodehouse when somebody was trying to escape from a policeman. He climbed a tree and pulled it up after him. So many people, they go up the spine and then try to pull everything up here. But Master was able to go down and up this Christmas tree of the chakras, always centered here, but able to enjoy this world and with the joy of people, and yet always in a divine way. Living with him was an absolutely incredibly wonderful experience. He could be so human and yet always in such a divine way that you understood how a human being should be. Always gracious, always dignified, but also very simple, childlike, loving, and a marvelous sense of humor. Sometimes he'd laugh so hard in telling a story that you didn't know what he was talking about. All you could do was laugh with him. But he could just go up and down the spine and be anywhere in his relationship. He could relate to anybody and relate meaningfully to that person. I've always loved in reflecting on a story of one time he came into a hotel in Minneapolis and some drunkard came up to him and embraced him, and he said, "Hello there, Jesus Christ." I don't know why he thought of him as Jesus Christ, but Master said hello. And Master saw that he was intoxicated with the wrong thing, and so he gave him a little touch of bliss. And the man said, "Hey, what are you drinking?" Master, with a little impish smile, said, "Well, I can tell you this, it has a lot of kick in it." And the man went away, he was sober and reflective. But he could relate to anybody, and always in a perfect way. But in this work on Whispers from Eternity, I've noticed that they did need polishing, because sometimes the metaphors were not clear. In his exuberance, they just sort of poured out. And I have sort of, in some cases, had to make them my own, and it's a bit like that song Bach Gounod. Bach wrote the Prelude in C, which on the piano is beautiful, but Gounod added to that as an accompaniment the melody Ave Maria. I was one of the Ave Marias, now my mind's confused. The other one is Schubert, but it's one of the lovely Ave Marias. And so it's Bach wrote the accompaniment, Gounod added a melody, and this is in a way what I've done, and I don't think I'm being presumptuous. I think this is what he wanted me to do, because this is the duty of the disciple, to expand on what he has done, and I will make it clear that this is his book, but also in some ways mine. So in what he wrote was, "The doomsday clouds of inevitable happenings thundered. The showers of quick flickering joys and hard-beating trials shot out to drench and drown the soil of my courage." You don't drown the soil, you inundate it and drown the plants maybe, or the people, but you don't drown the soil. A million difficulties sprang forth with knives of destruction. Well, knives and rain don't go together, do they? So, ready to stab me, with when cannons of uncertainties are booming, and shells of suffering are falling fast around me, then must thou make me feel that I am protected in the impregnable trench of thine immortal arms. You see the confusion there of images. You can't call a trench impregnable. It doesn't have arms. You see what I mean? And yet you feel the exuberance. It's beautiful. It just needs a little extra touch, that's all. When the light of fortune dawns on the dark tree of hard struggles, it is easy for its answering flowers of gratitude to open out and welcome the light of thy grace. During the dark nights of misfortune, I want the flowers of my appreciation to exhale the scent of gratefulness at thy feet of sacred silence. And so I rewrote it to read, "The doomsday clouds of inevitable, tragic events thundered and poured down inundations of suffering on my life. My courage was almost drowned in fear, as a million difficulties rose to destroy me. Clinging fast to thee, however, I survived. Now, when cannons of uncertainty boom before me, and the shells of calumny, persecution, and determined opposition fall like rain around me, I am ever protected in the impregnable fortress of thy love. I am so grateful to thee. When the light of good fortune dawns again, as it always must, following every hard night of struggles, it is easy for one to smile welcomingly at the light of thy overt, obvious grace. During dark nights of misfortune, however, I find it even sweeter to offer thee the flowers of appreciation for being ever there, protecting me. I offer the incense of all my gratitude at thy feet of deep inner communion. Receive me, my eternal beloved, in the sacred silence." And then the searching submarine of my soul, this was his version. The searching submarine of my soul fled from the dark vapors of earthly ambitions and dived into the unplumbed regions of cosmic consciousness. Swimming like a whale, the submarine of my mind moved into thy astral sea in search of thee. The long-strained searchlight eyes of my soul submarine suddenly wore the mystic flaming radiance of thy blessings, and I beheld thy presence everywhere. So this, obviously, it's full of exuberant and deep feeling, but it needed an extra touch. So what I wrote was, I found myself suffocating in the dark vapors of worldly ambition as my vessel sailed over life's seas. Fearful of delusion's death, I sought out and boarded the submarine of deep dedication and dove deep into my inner self. In the silent depths of thy consciousness I saw, first shimmering before me, a light which spoke to me of fulfillments never before dreamed of. Diving deeper still, the submarine of my mind moved into astral seas, seldom plumbed, in search of thee. Suddenly, as I probed with searchlight eyes, my soul submarine found itself in a new universe. I found myself surrounded on all sides by a mystic flaming radiance. Overwhelmed by thy supernal blessings, I beheld and reveled in thy presence everywhere. And then finally, as we rest and wake a little to slumber again, so from beneath the cover of fleeting dreams of birth and death, we rise for a while and fall asleep again, and dream another earthly dream of struggle. On the sleigh of incarnations we slide from dream to dream, dreaming on a chariot of astral fire, we roll from life to life. Dreaming we pass through dreams, failures, victories. Dreaming we sail over trying seas, eddies of laughter, whirlpools of indifference, waters of mighty events, deaths, births, dreams. It was only in thee that I awoke, and then I knew that I had been dreaming while I thought I was awake. And so, finally, as we rest in sleep, wake to our daily round of desperate seeming but only half-conscious activity, then fall back into sleep again. So do we pass fleetingly from birth to life to death again, waking again and again in new bodies, dashing about appointments and madly making commitments, keeping or breaking them, then forced to leave everything at the next call of death. Dream after dream of earthly struggles. On the sleigh of incarnations we find ourselves sliding past hopes and disappointments, victories and failures, fulfillments and disillusionments. When the smooth sow of easy passage melts and the underlying ice of insecurity breaks, we find ourselves plunged into heaving seas, eddies of gay, then desperate laughter, sargassos of clinging involvement, calms of indifference. Ah, nothing but dreams. So you see, what he wanted me to do, what he told me to do, what I ask you to do, is take whatever you hear, whatever you learn, make it your own. I don't say then you should present it publicly until you know, but Master told me to make this public, and so I feel safe in it, and I feel very blissful and blessed by his guidance in doing this work. But I have to go back then to my own life. How I was, as a child, I was seeking something. I think I speak for all of you in saying that. I was seeking truth, but I didn't know what it was, and so I kept seeking. And I was born, as you know, in Romania, grew up there until I was 13, but I went away to school in Switzerland, to England. I was in America, but my parents sent me away to school. My mother always knew that I had some sort of destiny. She had always, from before I was born, known that, and said, I offer this first child to God. And so she wanted me to have a special and spiritual education. So she sent me to different church schools and Quaker schools and so on. But in all of that time, I never had time to make any close friends. And I always felt like a stranger. I never felt at home anywhere. And my very upbringing helped that to become a reality. Until I met Master, and then I knew I was home. That was what I had been seeking. But like many of you again, and I'm trying to speak for all of you also, I tried so many things, and nothing seemed to work. I looked through politics, social activity, literature, music, philosophy, science, everything I could think of, and always trying to find what truth was. But I couldn't think of going to church because it just seemed so dead. I remember a hymn that we used to sing in our Episcopalian church in Ploiești in Romania, where we went every Sunday. There was a green hill far, far away, beyond the city walls, where our dear Lord was hung to die. He died to save us all. This thought of Christ suffering for our sins, my God, if he suffered, then he was still a man. A master should have he can only be one who has risen above suffering. Jesus suffered for our sins, meaning he was sad to see how people, even after all the love he had poured out to people, could still crucify him. On that hill above Jerusalem, he looked down and wept. He said, how often I, meaning through my prophets, God, through his prophets, have longed to gather you to me like a mother hen with her chickens, but you would not, and you persecuted the prophets. And now I have to say that I will not come until you understand and say, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. We should have devotion to those who love God. We should always aspire to be like those who inspire us. And a master doesn't suffer for himself. He wouldn't be a master if he did. But how Christianity has been crucified. Master said Jesus was crucified once. Christianity has crucified him every day for 2,000 years. And that's why he wrote his books, and that's why I wrote Revelations of Christ. And I was thrilled to be able to offer that book in a launch in Rome last April to one of the oldest halls in Rome. It was built in 1720, before this country was founded. And it was completely filled, standing room only, 800 people. And we sold 500 copies of that book. And within that same evening, the whole first edition was sold out. We had already sold it to the stores. We had to reprint it. It's going wonderfully in Italy, and I would love to see it doing as wonderfully here. It is doing well, but of all my books, it's the one I keep going back to and reading again and again, and always because I can't be far from a pen. But it's really an exciting book because it showed, I said from the start, there is only one religion in the universe. Its name is Sanatana Dharma. There can be no other religion than that. And I don't mean Ganesha and Saraswati. I mean that infinite and eternal religion which shows the infinite consciousness of God coming out and manifesting everything, and then that which draws us back into oneness with Him. That is the religion, and it cannot be different on the most distant planet in the most distant galaxy of this universe, because that is what it is all about. That is what the deeper teachings of Hinduism and of Christ and of Buddha and all the great religions have taught. Are there false religions? There are. We have to accept that man too will invent. But any religion that teaches this is true. Ask yourself, has it produced saints? If so, fine. Are those saints defined in terms of their love for God and of their feeling that He alone acts through us and He alone is the reality? Then they are true saints. There are guidelines by which you can go. And applying those guidelines to Master, I have to say that of all the saints that I have met, you can't compare saints because they're all equally great. I remember we saw the life of Gyandev years ago in English. It was a wonderful movie. Devi Mukherjee from Calcutta said to Master, "Oh, but if you had seen the life of Meera, you would hate this movie." Master said, "Why do you speak of comparisons? All is God. You can't compare saints. So if I do, remember, please, that I'm doing it in a very outward way, because even a Jivan Mukta is as great as anybody. He already has attained oneness with God. The state of Jivan Mukta means simply to have risen above ego consciousness, something we all have to do. But once you've done that, then everything you do, you don't do with the thought, I am doing it. You have the understanding that He is doing it through you. And you have to have reached Nirvikalpa Samadhi to have really attained that state. But it's a good state to affirm always. And once you've attained that state, then comes the real work. This is something that very interesting that a disciple of Ramakrishna said, that I used to think that when I attained Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the job would be finished. I see now that it is only begun. Because then you have to go back and realize that it was God through you who acted all the parts that you ever acted. You acted as a pirate maybe, as a merchant, as a seaman, as an emperor, as a slave, as a torturer, as the tortured. So many scenes you have played. And another absolutely fascinating aspect of this whole show is that when you were a pirate, or when you were a seaman, or when you were an emperor, or whatever, you were yourself as an emperor, yourself as a pirate. You were your own particular kind of pirate. In other words, there is some, as Master said, that in every atom is dowered with individuality. That is the fantastic thing about this cosmic creation, that God is center everywhere, circumference nowhere. He couldn't create this world the way we create things. That is why, what's his name, Joyce? Elmer Joyce, is it?
James Joyce?
No. Or Joyce Elmer, I'm age. He wrote Trees.
Joyce Kilmer.
Joyce Kilmer. He said, only God could make a tree. And this is true. You can make the form of a tree, but you can't infuse it with life. And how does God do things? He doesn't do it from outside in. We can get the form there. We can make the Pietà, as Michelangelo did. Beautiful statue, but you tap it and it's stone. But God grows from within. God from every center of the universe manifests outward. It's an absolutely wonderful, incredible, marvelous show. And every atom is dowered with individuality. And that atom will gradually expand, because that atom of individuality, that germ of individuality is centered in it. And it begins to want to understand more. And so gradually it begins to take on a certain moving form of its own. Although physics have discovered that even the atoms seem to have their own mind. You can't predict where they're going to go, they just go. And then they become amoeba, amoebae, and parameciums. Paramecia? And they become, I've read somewhere where somebody was saying that someday we'll have to think in terms of computers' rights. You can make a computer with a computer will think just as logically as you can. In fact, computers can outthink you in many ways. That's why we need computers. They help us. They can be very reasonable, but they can't think. Reason doesn't show your humanity. It's your feeling that shows your humanity. That is the thing you cannot create. Your individuality and your sense of feeling. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the calming of the whirlpools of feeling, chitta, feeling. When all your feelings are calmed, then you can know what it's all about. But as long as the feelings are jumping up and down or creating whirlpools, drawing everything into yourself, you will always be in confusion and in delusion. And so, over many incarnations, we have to go through these different experiences once you reach the human level. But it takes, in the Indian Shastra scriptures, it says it takes 5 to 8 million incarnations for the soul to reach the human level. Swami Shankara said, beware. It is a great, great good fortune to have reached this level of humanity. But you can fall again. If you live like a tiger, you may be a tiger again. If you live like a pig, you may find yourself a pig again. Master said that if you fall because you have lived an animalistic life, then it will only be for one lifetime and then you will come back. So don't worry about any spider that you may step on might have been your mother. And yet, unfortunately, if you keep doing that and go down for one life and come back and then act badly again and keep going down, if you keep doing that repeatedly, you may be thrown far down. And I was with Master when he was dictating his Gita, and they didn't put this in their explanation of him, their editing of it. But he said the soul can fall as low as, believe this or not, as a germ. This is an incredible universe. He said that there are whole galaxies that manifest different qualities. Tamoguna, Rajoguna, Sattaguna, the darkening quality, the activating quality, the uplifting quality. Whole galaxies manifest these qualities primarily. The galaxy in which we live is primarily Rajoguna. But he said that you can fall into a Tamoguna universe even then. And in that universe, there's all the grossest forms of living and cannibalism and everything. And he said that epidemics of diseases are often germ clouds coming from tamasic universes. How did they get here? Space is an illusion. There's nothing far or near. It's all here. It's all in the mind. You can't put it together philosophically. Master said, when you're looking for the castle, don't get lost in the garden. You can think of this. What does this plant mean? What's the name of that flower? How long does this flower live? And so on. He said, go to the castle. Get to know the Lord of the castle. He will take you around. In fact, there was this wonderful samadhi that Master had shortly before I met him, in which the Divine Mother took him all over the universe. And she was talking through his voice, and sometimes his voice would become a woman's voice, and then it would become a man's again. And they were laughing together, and he was saying, oh, now I see how you've done it. Oh, they had a good laugh over it. This universe is such fun when you think of it. But if you think you've got to reason it all out, you're going to have the burden of the universe on your head, and you'll be like all these intellectuals you see. I used to be like that. I remember, in fact, it's interesting because somebody came to Italy recently, Roberto Pablo Pairo. He was from Argentina, and he was my roommate in college. And this man came to me from Argentina, and I asked him, "Can you find him somehow? I've always wanted to get in touch with him." And he was able to. And so I had a letter from Roberto just the other day, and it was fun hearing from him again. He's had a very different life from mine. He was very dignified and a fine man, but he was into politics. And I remember him saying to me one day, "Why do you think all the time? Why do you think so much?" And it's true. I was trying to figure it all out with my brain, and I was extremely solemn. But I did think at least well, because I remember one time I was in Charleston, South Carolina. As you know, I wanted to become a playwright. And my desire was to help people to know truth. But I finally had to face the brutal fact that I didn't know truth. And that undermined any purpose that I might have for writing, and so I dropped it. I thought, why flood the world with my ignorance? And I never wrote again until I wrote for Master. But I remember while I was in Charleston going out one night into the dark and trying to figure out with my mind what God was all about. And I thought, well, he can't be an old man in the clouds. He can't be a policeman sitting up there waiting for us to make a mistake and say, "Ah, now you go to prison." It can't be that. What is it that helps me what is it in me that makes me ask this question? I'm conscious. Where did I get this consciousness? It can't be from this brain. Therefore, it must be that consciousness already is. And if it is, then that must be what God is consciousness. And if he is consciousness, then I have to look at my life and I see that when I am closer in tune with my higher consciousness, or when I am more conscious even, I put it that way too, I feel happier. And when I am less conscious, as when I'm drinking or sleeping or angry, then I am farther away from that awareness. I'm less conscious and more limited in myself. And I said, if that's true, then the goal of my life must be to become more conscious in him and more in tune with that great consciousness. Thus far, reason did take me, and I came back absolutely dazed. I remember I had 4 roommates at the time, and I was sitting at the table and just dazed with the grandeur of this perception. And they were laughing at me and saying, "Oh, what's wrong with him? He's always so serious." But I was serious. I wanted to know. And it was only when I met Master that I found myself laughing all the time. This path is so wonderful because it opens the heart. It helps you to understand that God is joy, that every little thing you do is filled with joy if you understand it. Now I go around and I see a scene, I see trees, I see birds, and I think, oh, how wonderful. It's so blissful, everything. If only we could understand that he is the reality. But a long time it takes to understand that. And I remember struggling and trying to look for truth until I did understand that night that what I must seek is God. And the churches didn't give it to me. The churches were always just talking about, I remember our priest in the Church of St. James the Less in Scarsdale saying, "If you don't do so and such, you'll end up in the lap of the Nazis." It was all politics and nonsense, just absolutely absurd. But yet, I remember Frank Laubach, a great Christian missionary. There have been great Christians. And he was on a campaign in America, trying to get more people, more ministers, just to mention God in their sermons. They don't know what God is all about, and so they don't talk about him. Church doesn't give you God. You've got to make your church your own heart. But when I found that, in fact, I got to meet Frank Laubach, and I had lunch with him. And I remember him saying to me, he was very supportive of my work, but he said to me, I'm suffering from a fatal disease, and I looked at him very sympathetically. And he explained, and I can say I'm suffering from the same disease, old age. He died just 4 months after I met him, but I was very glad to meet him. He wrote a book called Letters of a Modern Mystic, and it's a beautiful book. Letters to his father, but I think his father was God. And he wrote about how he was disciplining his mind to converse with God and to think of God not in the third person, but always in the second person. God, now, will you help me to taste this food? Will you lift up my hand? We are together lifting up this hand. And again, everything he did was a conversation with God. That's how we should live our lives. That's why Master used to say seclusion is the price of greatness. Because to a certain extent it is good to be secluded in yourself always, to keep your mind inwardly centered and talking with him. That's what Whispers is from. This book, Whispers from Eternity, is an absolute treasure house of conversations with God. All the different attitudes, all the different understandings that you might have. And I, partly from reading that book, partly from attunement with him, but how often I have found that what he said worked. Such that, just like with this song that we just heard, when green summer fade and winter draw near, my Lord, in your presence I live without fear. So that everything that comes to us, we find ourselves feeling grateful for them. If people want to insult you, thank them. You don't have to thank them outwardly. They might not understand. But you can certainly thank them in your heart. Why should you thank them for insulting you? Because they're helping you to realize that you're not this stupid ego. I remember I went to I hosted a dinner. I mentioned this in my book, Sadhu Beware. I recommend that book. It's a small book, but a very, very helpful one. And in this, what happened was that I was invited to a big conference in Virginia by somebody who wanted to start a community. He never did start one. He had many famous speakers there from around the country, and I don't know how famous I was, but he invited me too. And of all the people there, I was the only one who had actually founded a successful community. But these other people were very conscious of their fame. I wasn't at all. And I invited them out to dinner. And so they were all sitting around the table, talking to each other and totally ignoring me. When's your book coming out? Oh, in October. Well, mine's coming out in November, all this kind of thing. And they totally ignored me, and I was the host of this thing. I was paying the damn dinner. And you might have thought I would feel extremely offended. Instead, I thought it was absolutely delightful. How wonderful to be unimportant. I remember I met this woman after a big function in San Francisco, and I was talking with her, and I asked her name, and she told me, and she said, "What is your name?" And I said, "Swami Kriyananda." She said, "Oh, but you're famous." I said, "Well, maybe, but why do you say but?" She said, "But every other famous person I've met seemed important." Which you could have taken as a pretty fair insult, I suppose. I thought it was just charming. I loved it. It's good to be unimportant. It's good to be unobserved. It's good to be deprecated. It's good when people insult you, because what you want to do, is forget that you are this stupid little ego. You are the infinite who is thinking and dreaming through this ego. But you aren't this. And the goal of your life and the goal of all your seeking has to result eventually in remembering and realizing that it was He who acted through you. And the more you think that, the more you feel absolutely free. I've never been nervous in front of a public, which people say is the thing that makes most people the most nervous, speaking before people. I've never been nervous for two reasons. One is that I think that if people think I'm a fool, it doesn't hurt for me to know it. If I am, and if I'm not, then what does it matter? What they think doesn't matter. What is true is. So if you all think I'm stupid, okay, I don't mind at all. Master told me to speak, so I'll speak. And if you drive me out with sticks and stones, I'll say thank you and take one of them home and put it on my altar. Because really, we have to understand that we are not who we think we are. We are so much more. If you can just get rid of this thought of I. Somebody says something and you think, what about me? Somebody suffers and he says, oh, why do I have to suffer? Why me? You're so bound as long as you have this feeling of I, and everything is tied to this little post of ego. I could do that. You see a beautiful sunset and you think, well, I could paint a better painting than that. Or somebody else sees the sunset and thinks, oh, I wonder what's for supper. Always thinking about your body, yourself. What a prison you live in. We've got to get rid of this thought. And so be happy when anybody insults you. Be happy when any thought comes to you to put yourself down. I remember years ago, I was walking in Upper Ayodhya, and I saw these little lights in trailers, Seva's trailer and Asha's trailer and different people's trailers. And the thought came to me, I did all this. Years ago there was nothing, and now there's light. And then I asked myself, do you like that feeling? No, I don't like it at all. It limits me. It was done. God did it, but as soon as I think I did it, then I've got to live up to the mark. I've got something to shoot for. I've got to do more. Let Him do it. Then you can be relaxed. You don't have to worry about things. Don't you see that He can do so much more? Sometimes people say, well, how have you been able to do so much? Because I've never felt responsible for any of it. He did it. And that way, as soon as it's finished, it's His. And so I'm able to, many people, I remember there was this funny episode. We were at Disneyland, a group of us, and there was a man with his wife on that boat at Disneyland that goes around a lake. And it's all guided by tracks underwater, so you can't go wrong. But there's a steering wheel, and it's not attached to anything, but it gives you the impression that you're steering it. And I saw this boat with this man and his wife riding, and I waved to them, and the wife waved back, and she said, wave back, Johnny, wave back. He said, don't bother me, I've got to steer this boat. It was fast approaching a wall of rock, and he had to steer around it. And that's how our lives go. We think we're steering, and He's doing it all. It doesn't mean you have to sit back and do it. You have to do it in cooperation with Him. This is how I've written music, and it's a very interesting thing, because really I haven't written music. I did take a course in music composition in college and flunked it. I didn't flunk it because of ineptitude, truthfully. I flunked it because of total indifference. I never came to class. I never did any assignments. I was sitting on the steps of the hall where people were entering to take their exam, and I was studying the book hastily to read all the little rules that were highlighted, so I would perhaps do something with the exam. And then on the exam we had to write a melody for a bass sequence. And all of a sudden there popped into my mind this beautiful oriental melody which fitted perfectly, and I wrote it, and he said he loved the melody, but he gave me a good grade because of that melody, but he had to flunk me in the course because I never came to class. But I didn't really know any rules of composition. I knew two rules. One, that it's good if the melody can go in opposite directions from the the bass line can go in opposite directions from the melody, and good also if you don't have parallel fifths. But there are times when the bass can't go opposite, and I have found one occasion at least when parallel fifths worked. But what I've done is have a very clear idea, and this will help you in anything that you try to do, creative or otherwise. I've had a very clear idea in my mind of what I wanted to say, what I wanted to do. Then I offered it up to God, and I said, well, God, give me a melody that says that. And I found that it comes just like that. Just amazing. That whole sequence of mine, 9 songs of Mediterranean magic, I wrote in 1 hour. In fact, I was trying to get ready to give a Sunday service, but this melody popped into my mind, so I had to sing it into a little tape recorder. Then I started to meditate again, and the next one came, and in 1 hour I did 9. One of them was Pompeii, and I had a very clear idea of Pompeii, that after all it was a tragedy as Vesuvius destroyed it. But on the other hand, it was 2,000 years, and it can't be that tragic today. And so there had to be a little, in the reflection and the memory, there had to be a little softening of that tragedy. There had to be sin that involved that karma that created that destruction. But after all, in 2,000 years, we hope they've learned some lessons. So I had all these thoughts there, and I said, okay, God, give me a melody. And I think the melody that came just like that is a right melody. It says that. But a moment afterwards, I was doing this to some slides that I had taken of the area. And so I had some slides that were of Napoli, or of the mood of Napoli. And so immediately that song came, when you come from Napoli, la 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 la, a tarantella. And then immediately after that, there was some slides of a monastery in Sorrento. And I wanted something that would express the monastic feeling, Gregorian chant. But I said, well, God, help me in this. But now here's what I wanted to say, and I said this the other evening to a group of friends, the other evening at the table, that I cooperated with the inspiration. You can't just say, well, here I am, God, give it to me. You have to work with it. And so I was thinking Gregorian chant, long I've called thee, my Lord, long I've called thee, true Gregorian mode. Many years I have longed for your sight. Then I thought, well, Lord, it's time to change this mode a little bit, make it more modern, because it's no longer a monastery. Tourists go there now. So I changed it. How much longer? Bathe the darkness with tears. Now going up to that is away from the Gregorian mode. La 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 la. Bathe the darkness with tears. That's more modern. Of devotion. Then to reinforce it, offered candles in prayer to your light. Then by experience of popular music, which I used to hear when I was a teenager, made me think that the direction would be, because the next line was, how much longer, friend? How much longer, friend? Well, I knew that wouldn't do. So I had to rein it in. And so I held it and I said, how much longer, friend, must I cry your name? See, I was cooperating. My impulse was to go higher, but I held it in because I knew that's what it had to be to express that feeling. Then I wanted to go into infinity with this song. And the rule of music is that you end a melody on the tonic. And if I had followed that rule, I would have said, I am yours, ever yours, will you come? That would have killed it. So I said, I am yours, ever yours, will you come? So you see, it's a lovely melody. And he gave it to me, but I had to work with him. And so you see that you cannot be passive in your work with him. He put us in this world, intelligent beings in his name, to make this place more beautiful. We should create beauty around us. We should bring joy into our lives. We should express his consciousness outwardly. And Master more than most saints. I remember I met this one sadhu in Puri many years ago. He was 132 years old. You have to say that he must have had some power to have been able to live so long. But he told me, you should never enjoy anything. And I said, what, not even a beautiful sunset? No. And it's a valid approach to God. Neti, neti, not this, not that. No, I want nothing of Maya, just want you. But it's a very dry approach. It's a very gonic approach. And I love Master's approach. He said, enjoy everything, but with the joy of God. So that when you see a beautiful sunset, don't say, oh, I mustn't enjoy it. Oh. And what a great life that would make. You tell a beautiful joke. Oh. Have a beautiful meal. No, enjoy, but enjoy with the joy of God. You see, how can you enjoy anything? This is what you must learn. It isn't the sunset that makes you beautiful. A turtle could see that sunset and not think anything. Why do you enjoy the sunset? Because there's something in your heart that enjoys it. Your capacity to enjoy. Somebody who has no capacity to react positively will say, I've seen those things before. Give me a good steak. It's your ability to enjoy. This ability is the God within you. So that anything you see that gives you joy, understand and discriminate. This is where the joy is. And then when people accuse you or insult you or do anything, understand this is free. They can't touch me inwardly. And let me listen and see if maybe they're right. Don't have a tit-for-tat reaction. Oh, yeah, and you're another kind of thing. No, thank you. I'll think about it. Be free in yourself. And there are times when you simply, because of Maya, and we're all in it or we wouldn't be in these bodies, you find there's something you can't help enjoying, something you can't help wanting for yourself, some pleasure, some attachment, something. Don't say, no, I mustn't. You'll just suppress it. The Bhagavad Gita says the suppression is useless. You have to accept it in the right way. And so try always inwardly to be somewhat detached from it, so that even if you're enjoying, don't enjoy in your heart. Say, this is not me. And as you watch and separate yourself bit by bit from it, you'll be able to see that it really isn't you, and you'll have the strength to offer it to God. This is another experience I had in my life. It's well worth sharing. When I was young, not very young, but 20, 21, I used to smoke. And I didn't smoke much, but I had a pack of cigarettes and shared it with people and usually went through a pack a day that way. And then came the time after that evening in Charleston where I decided I would seek God. And I decided that my goal and my role and my way in life would be to become a hermit. I'd given up writing. I'd given up all my, I was brought up in a well-to-do suburb, Scarsdale, New York. I was brought up in a well-to-do home. I was surrounded by people who had full expectation of having a pleasant wife and a pleasant home and a pleasant job and a pleasant suburb surrounding and a pleasant life. And I looked at it and I said, whoa, boring. I can't live that way. It's such a compromise with what I feel in my heart. And I just rejected it with all my heart. And I thought, let me be a hermit. And I didn't know what it meant to be a hermit, but I did know one thing. I wouldn't be able to go in and buy cigarettes every day. And so I decided I would give up cigarettes. Well, it was like what Mark Twain said, I find smoking the easiest thing in the world to give up. I've done it 1,000 times. And every time I would be on the wagon, so to speak, I would have my coffee after a meal, and the cigarette had tasted so nice with that coffee, and so I'd go back to it. But this was a lesson I learned, and it came from my good karma, I suppose, but it's well worth sharing with you, that every time I failed and went back to smoking. I never said, "Oh, I failed again. What's the matter with me?" I didn't do that. Why? That would only affirm my weakness. Every time I said, "Well, I haven't yet succeeded." And in that affirmation of not yet succeeding, I found that I was getting stronger and stronger until finally, after a little less than a year, I remember I was living with these 4 boys in Charleston, and I said to one of them, "Well, now I'm giving up smoking." And he said, "Oh, I've heard that one before." I said, "No, I mean it." And I did mean it. And maybe, and this is another thing that would help you, I took that thought into the subconscious. That's the best time to affirm. When you're going to sleep, carry that thought into the subconscious. And the first thing you do when you wake up, affirm that. That's why they say that he must have gotten up on the wrong side of bed. Because if you wake up with a negative thought, you might carry it through the day. It goes into the subconscious then, because the subconscious is open at that moment, when you're sleeping, when you're waking. So that too may have been a part of it. I don't know. But I know that from then on until, well, forever, I never had the slightest desire to smoke. And later I was in New York and thinking seriously of going to South America and maybe finding some place there in the jungle where I could live alone and much more cheaply than in America. And it was a very hot day, and those of you who know New York know how very hot it can get with that humidity in New York. And I went into a bar and I had a couple of beers. And I wasn't at all drunk or tipsy or anything, but I noticed there was a certain lessening of clarity in my mind. And I thought, well, here I'm trying to attain more clarity. Why should I do anything that lessens my clarity? So I said, I'll never drink again. That was not hard to give up. I just stopped. But again and again, I found that it's easy if you just make up your mind. I read Autobiography of a Yogi. That was an amazing thing in itself, just the way I found it. Because, I didn't know anything about Hindu teachings. Never read anything. All of you, I imagine, have grown up hearing words like guru and karma and maybe dharma and yoga and so on. I never heard any of those things back in 1948. And I know that it would have been very difficult to leave everything and go seeking Master if my father had been there and if my mother had been there. But with my father, there was a very strong influence from him, such that for some time when I tried to visualize Master, I would see my father. And so God took him away. He was an oil geologist, and God sent him through his company, Esso, to Cairo, Egypt, to find oil there. They took him away from there, but another company, Mobil, came in later and found it just where he said it would be. And my mother was going to join him, and I helped her to pack up and put her on the ship to go to join him in Cairo. They didn't fly in those days. And as I left the ship, I went uptown and went to a bookstore and saw a section in the bookstore. I had read in my mother's bookshelves a little book called The Short World Bible. And in that Bible it had little quotations from different religions. And what I read from the Indian religion was absolutely thrilling to me. It was my own. I knew it. And it said things like, they didn't limit God to a form. It spoke of him as infinite. And I said, well, this is in keeping with my scientific upbringing. It makes sense. How could God be limited? He's got to be infinite. I had already figured that one out for myself anyway. And then it said from the Bhagavad Gita, if you would know me, then go to a solitary place and seek me. And I had decided that that is what I would do. So I had that little touch of just a few pages of Sanatana Dharma teachings from India. And so I went to the Indian teachings in this bookstore, and I saw different things, the Bhagavad Gita and so on. Somebody in Charleston had said, you ought to read the Bhagavad Gita. It's the greatest scripture in the world. And I didn't know what he was talking about, but the name remembered. It seemed to me anciently familiar. And when I saw that book there, I thought, oh, that's the one I want to get. And then after going through everything, I looked back and I saw face out. I'm surprised I didn't see it first. This beautiful face. And it said, Autobiography of a Yogi. And I was very interested and I was fascinated and I was thinking of getting it. And then I opened it up. It said, dedicated to Luther Burbank, an American saint. I said, oh, how preposterous. There can't be an American saint. I had this hypnosis of thinking that nations produce the man. You have all kinds of people everywhere. But there are great saints in America. I couldn't imagine it. Master said that some of them are living with Babaji. I couldn't have imagined it. And so I put that book down, and I bought the Bhagavad Gita. I took it home. I was living in a rooming house in Scarsdale, wondering what to do with my life. And I read the Gita very quickly. It was just thrilling. And then what I was trying to do was get a job on a ship, because I figured that if I'm on a ship, they pay you very good wages, but you can't spend them. And so that way I can save my money and have enough money to buy land in a jungle in South America and then seek God. And I was thinking, if I find peace of mind, that's enough for me. And I went up to New York from Scarsdale to go down to Bowling Green to see if there was a ship that I could join. I had my papers, seaman papers, everything. And I reached a street where I was going to cross to get into the subway on 7th Avenue when I thought of Autobiography of a Yogi. And that thought came to my mind almost forcefully. And I thought, oh, no, I've been reading too much. I'm too intellectual. And besides, I'm trying to save my money. I don't want to spend it. And so I decided I would not buy that book. I went toward the curb to cross it. Believe me or not, it was as if a force turned me left. I was excited. I thought, what is this? I didn't make this decision. I thought, there must be something important in that book. And I went and bought it. And I was holding it to my chest. And a friend of mine from Scarsdale High School, Doug Birch, was in the same store. And he was telling me with glowing thoughts how he'd make a big future in radio and television and advertising and talking big talk like that kind of American. The more he talked, the more I clutched this book to me. And I went back to Scarsdale and began reading. I was just in tears the whole time. Tears of joy, laughter, tears, just thrilled. I thought, this is for me. I was invited out by some friends of the family. And the daughter of the family, interestingly, lives near our center in Seattle. I've seen her since then. But they invited me to lunch that day, and they served chicken a la king. Well, Master was a vegetarian. I had decided from then on, no more meat. So I carefully pushed the chicken aside and ate the rest. I didn't want to insult my hosts. And the next day, another friend of mine invited me out to dinner. They were sort of taking pity on me because I was alone there. And they very considerately provided me with a date. And Master, I read that he was a monk. I decided then I'm a monk. And they gave us hamburger for lunch. Well, I couldn't eat hamburger. I couldn't push it aside, so I just had to tell them I really wasn't feeling quite well enough to eat that much today. And then we went to a polo game, and I sat as far away from this girl as I could. I remember I was in Nielsen's with my brother and another boy who was nominated the wolf of the class. And I was saying, can't you see that sex is binding? It just ties you. You aren't free. And they looked at each other and said, what's wrong with him? But the next day, I went into town. My godfather worked in the same building as my father had worked, or when he was in New York. And I didn't find him in, so I just left a note there saying I'm going to California to join a group that I think can tell me what I want to know about life and about God. And I took the next bus, 4 days, 4 nights, didn't stop on the way, and arrived in Los Angeles. And I went to Encinitas and slept the night there. I went to the monastery there, the ashram, and I was thinking, as Master, when he came to see Ram Gopal Mojumdar, how he came out to meet him, I thought maybe Master will come to meet me. Well, I wasn't on his level, and I didn't deserve that kind of a hearing, but I wasn't ready for what happened. Because I came in, and this old lady came out, and I was dressed all in white because I thought in California, just like in Florida, everybody wore Palm Beach suits. And so I probably looked like a serviceman of some kind, and I rang the doorbell. This old lady came out, and she said, yes, what may I do for you? And I said, well, I wanted to see Paramhansa Yogananda. Oh, you've come to see about the water? Apparently they'd been having some trouble with the water. I said, no, I want to see Paramhansa Yogananda. Oh, you can't see him. He's up in Hollywood, in the church there. Church in Hollywood? I thought it was nothing but movie studios. I was completely at sea in Hollywood. I mean, in California. I didn't know anything. And I told her I wanted to become his disciple. She said, have you read the lessons? What lessons? Well, most people, before they come, they write and become members and study the lessons. Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. Apparently he had this big organization. I didn't even think of that. I just thought he had this little seaside hermitage. And I was very upset with her. She said, you have to finish the lessons before you can join him. I think she was testing me, or Master was doing it through her. But I was very angry with her. And I was thinking how many churches there are with these little biddies. Or I didn't know it was Sister Gyanamata. And I took the bus up to Hollywood. And I remember in the bus, I was thinking about my experience with her, and I was thinking, and suddenly I remembered her eyes. And they were very deep. I thought, uh-oh. She was much more than I thought. And I said, please forgive me. The moment I said that, please forgive me, I knew I was accepted. I don't know how I knew, but I did. And when I came to Master, well, you know the story, you've read it. But he accepted me that day. And all that he said, all that he did, I had to put those doubts that I had on a shelf. I couldn't doubt him, but I couldn't believe all that he wrote about. But I found in time that it did work. And the thing is that living with him, and I've been gassing on for so long that I could just go on for hours, but I obviously can't. You've got your lunch, much more important. But I have to say that this path has been absolutely wonderful. I don't regret a single moment of it. Have I suffered? Yes, I have suffered. And I suppose that I am like everybody else in saying that I think it was worse than most people. But probably it was worse than many people because I'm a pretty stubborn fellow. And Divine Mother had to beat me pretty hard. But I have learned so much. And now when tests come, I say, thank you, Mother, just like this whisper. And I was able to edit this whisper and to tune into what Master said, because I had experienced that myself, and I know what it's like. Don't worry when suffering or bereavement or anything untoward comes to you, because you will see that this path is really, it's filled with joy. And the more you follow it, I remember when I went into that operation in Delhi last December, Pablo was reminding me, because one thing that's been very strange, you know, people my age, usually their voices become sort of croaking. Well, I don't know, you know, most people become a little that way. Instead, my voice has become deeper and more resonant, and I don't know what's happening. And I was laughing with them outside the operation room. I was already on my table there, and I was saying, "None may linger on the way, none may coax time to stay." And then they wheeled me in, but I was feeling absolute bliss. And when I came out from under the operation, somehow I knew that something serious had been lifted from me. You know, Ananda Community, she got cancer of the liver. One time she was resting outside her ashram and by the Ganges, and she saw this black monkey jump out of her stomach and run and drown itself in the Ganges. These cancers are evil demons. And this thing, I felt it had left me. And I felt so much bliss, and I feel bliss. And I want to share that bliss. And I know that I've done a lot of work for my Guru, and I hope he's pleased with that work. I hope he's pleased with all the books I've written and the music I've written and all that stuff, but I haven't done any of it. He did it through me, but not passively. We have worked together, and that's how I want you to work too. Don't be passive. God gave us our willpower and our individuality that we use it for the good and for our good. But if there is one thing that will really and that does really make me feel satisfied, is that if I can share that bliss. And what has pleased me more than anything else is so many letters that I've received from all of you saying that, yes, this is what you felt. I pray that it be more and more of that, because that's what life is all about. Everything else is just shadows and show. Might as well make it a good show while you're in it, but remember, it isn't yours. It belongs to Him. This is not your life, and nothing that you have done can you claim. And when you reach that state of Jivan Mukta, and can look back, even in one meditation, Master said, saints can just vanish a whole incarnation. But don't think that there are just one or two incarnations. The Bhagavad Gita says that when I remanifest this universe in a day of Brahma, I throw all these souls out again, and they all go back to the same place they had before. And when this great thing ends in pralaya and everything merges back into God, you don't become God. You go back into a sort of seed state. What that state will be, I don't know. But it will not be oneness with God, because from that you come out again. And how many days of Brahma have you been coming out? That is a scary thought. A day of Brahma lasts billions of years. Time is nothing, but when you're going through it, it's something, isn't it? If a murderer is coming at you and creeping up the stairs toward your room, time passes very slowly. Time is very relative. But in the Rubat of Omar Khayyam, and I do recommend that you read that book because it's thrilling. He was a great master also. But in there it says that many times we have to go through this thing until we understand, and God won't free you. You have to do that work. But when you do, and when you can free yourself by absolutely casting everything at His feet, and then reach that state of freedom in His consciousness, then you have to go back through all those billions, let's face it, billions of lives, where you've been everything, and in so many different ways. And the human mind has so many ways of catching you again. She was beautiful. Oh, but look at her. Oh, how about that one? And that fortune was made that way, but oh, wow, look at this business. And that home was nice, but oh, I'd love to have that one. And there's just an infinity of ways to get trapped. Please don't. Always, this is the one thing you must always remember, that it's all based on Dvaita. God was able to manifest this universe by creating Dvaita. The one consciousness of the unmoving spirit had to move to create the vibrations that created manifested existence. And that up of the wave always has to be balanced by a down. so that every success has to be balanced by a failure. Every fulfillment has to be balanced by a disappointment and a disillusionment. Every up has to be balanced by a down. It all has to even itself out. A high wave will not change the level of the ocean. It will always be compensated for by a dip. And so it all has to add up to zero. Isn't it a horrifying reality that you have lived for billions of years and tried and struggled to attain something for billions of years, and the sum total of all those efforts has to end. It has no choice. It has to end in zero. Isn't that a dismaying thought? It's all for nothing. You can't make a better country. You can't make a better body. You can't make a better family. You can't make a better world. Yes, you should try, because we're in this show and we should act well as instruments for God. But He's created the show. He's the doer of it all. And finally, when you reach that state of realizing that none of those things mattered, God did it all. He was acting through all those lives. Then you're able to see. And I said to Master, but can't you just say, I'm one with you and be free? And he said, yes, you can. But most saints don't, because they use that little tie to bring them back to help other people. But once they finally, just think of finally, after all that suffering, all those ups and downs, usually people don't attain that state from this planet, but some do. Most attain it from going to higher and higher stages, as it said in this poem in the Whispers. But sooner or later you will attain that state of complete freedom in God. You'll be a Paramhansa, or supremely free being, a Siddha. And after reaching that state, I remember Master said of Sister Ganamata, I saw her sink into that watchful state. She was completely free. She had to suffer. He held her in her body for all those 20 years of suffering, mainly for our sake. She was helping him to work out our karma. But at the end, she was completely free. And I said to him, because, the thought is that he's the last of the gurus, I said, but he had told me that before you reach that state, you have to have freed at least 6 others. And I thought, well, then how could she be free if she hasn't had disciples? And he caught my thought. He said she had disciples. And I've understood that he is the guru in the sense that Jesus Christ was the guru of Christianity. But there have been many saints in Christianity who have been teachers to their individual disciples. But he is the particular power, the particular blessing. Krishna, many Hindus think of Krishna as their guru, but he's their guru through somebody living, somebody who is able to give them that touch. And so we must try to reach that point where Master can use us more and more. And in that process, we become more enlightened. Don't think you want to hog the whole cheese to yourself. Share it with others. Whatever inspiration you feel, share with others. But once you reach that state of complete freedom in Him, Satchidananda, ever existing, ever conscious, and as Master added the phrase, ever new joy. People ask the question, why did God create this universe? Sri Yukteswar answered, leave a few questions to be answered in the infinite. But I have an answer to that too. It is the nature of bliss to want to renew itself. It is the nature of bliss to want to express itself. And I think this too is true. And so God's own nature caused Him to bring it out, bring it back, bring it out, bring it back. But once you're in that state, you're everything. You're everyone. As I said to Ananda Ma once, we would love to have you come to America. She said, I'm there already. You're already there. You don't need anything. Very, very few leave that state to come back and help struggling humanity. Ramakrishna told this parable of 3 men who left their village. And they came to their surprise upon a high wall. And they thought, well, I've never seen this wall here. I wonder what's behind it. And they said, well, let's work together and we'll get one person up and then he can come back and tell us what it's like. And so one of them climbed on the shoulder of the other, and the other one got on his shoulder and reached the top of the wall and stood on it, and he looked down on the other side, and he clapped his hands joyfully, jumped down on the other side, and they waited and waited, and he didn't come back. And they said, well, what is over there? We've got to see. So they figured out a way that one man stood on a tree stump, and the other one climbed up on his shoulders, and he was able to get to the top of the wall. And he looked down, he said, oh, wonderful, and he jumped down, and the other one waited, and he didn't come back. He said, well, I've got to see what's over there. So he found a tree that was lying on the ground, and he managed to pick it up and lean it against the wall and clamber up the wall with a great deal of effort and get to the top. And he saw the most beautiful garden he'd ever seen in his life. And he thought, I could just forget that dusty, dirty village and live there for all my life and just feel wonderful. And he was just about to do it when he thought, but what about all those villagers there? They don't know about this place. So he jumped back and went to tell all of them about it. This is what the avatars are. It's not Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. It's not Rama and Krishna. The avatar is a free soul who decides, out of his longing to help people, to come back and help others. And this is what I see in this wonderful book, Whispers from Eternity. Master's longing to help people. As he said in God's Boatman, I will come back if need be 1 trillion times, so long as one stray brother is left weeping by the wayside. We have such a wonderful thing in him. Yes, all saints are equal. I don't want to make comparisons, but how grateful I am to him that he did come back, and he met us on such a human level, and yet always in his presence. I felt that I was in the presence of God himself. I would look into his eyes and I would see no ego motive there. And if he had to scold me, I would see nothing but sadness that he had to scold me, but he was doing it for my welfare. But always, I remember this story, and I've told it in the past, how one time he was scolding one of the nuns, and Jean Haupt, one of the monks, was sitting in the room at the opposite end, and Master would turn fiercely to this woman, shout at her. He'd turn back and see Jean and sort of wink, then turn back and... But he was trying to shake her. One time there was a woman who was, every time he saw her, he'd scold her, and she'd get very angry and upset. Finally, she realized that, well, if this is the way things are, I might as well take it. And he stopped in the middle of his scolding. He said, I see you're learning. I was trying to make you more docile. So he never scolded her again. God loves you. But if he scolds you, and he will, and he does, don't blame him. Don't feel, why me? Be grateful, God. I don't want any of this, so beat me as much as you want. I have thought that I feel sometimes a great fatigue in my chest, and I could easily, I think, die from a heart attack. But I think that would be a useless way to die. I'd much rather die a martyr. I would much rather have these popes and Catholics crucify me. I would be happy to have my death itself be useful, because nothing of this life matters. He alone is our goal. Please keep that firmly in mind, because nothing else will satisfy you. Oh yes, again and again you get on this boat and you paddle toward its shores and you think, uh-oh, there's a nice island. Uh-oh, here's a nice person. It doesn't work. It won't work. It can't work. Only God will work in the end. And if I've learned anything from this struggling life of mine, it is that. I bless you all. Thank you for coming.